Perigalav Halacha Yudalad in Hilchos Chametz Pesach. We go down to the period. The Rambam says in Yudalad Shochat HaShechet V'Kibul HaKohen. Anyone can shecht. Usually the Kohen didn't allow anyone to shecht the korban, even though it's permissible for Yisrael as well to slaughter. But on the Korban Pesach they allowed anyone to slaughter the Kibul HaKohen. The Kohen would receive the blood because that's only with the Kohen. As we find in Hilchos Chametz U'Matzah, Hakorbonos. Now the Gemara in Psochim questions the Nusach Beres HaShrita. You say Lishchait or Ala Shrita, because the Bailam are commanded Ala Shrita. So Bachiyodai V'Shochat, and the Achronim are very lengthy about this. He gives what he received in the container, which receives the blood, the bozov. He gives it to the one next to him, the person next to him, to the person next to him. Rambam says this is so that many are involved in the mitzvah. And until the blood comes to the kohen who's close to the mizbeach, who pours it against the base of the mizbeach. The Gemara in Zvachim 14b, there's a disagreement if one has to actually move it by foot, or it's enough to just get it there. And it says from what Rambam writes here that we can't prove that they didn't make any move at all, because maybe the kohen would move just a drop in one direction, drop back, and it's called going. The Rambam doesn't mention that the kohen has to move, even though he codifies the halacha that you go without going, it's not called halacha, because he relies on what he wrote in you need a little bit of movement. Sheyozus ksas, you should go a little bit. The Mari Kurkis explains that when the last kohen stands next to the mizbeach and he pours the blood, he has to go a little bit in order to come to mizbeach. Therefore, the Rambam doesn't mention the others have to move. So it would seem from his words that not all of them have to move, just that last one who pours the blood. But according to Lecha Mishnah, it would seem that every kohen who holds the kli has to move a little bit in that direction. He pours one pouring against the Yisoid, and he takes one mizrach which is whole, and he returns the empty one that he poured, because you have to first do the mitzvah and then you return. Only after he's received the complete. Now first it sounds like he has to pour it first, not just accept it. Rashi writes, no, but if he receives the empty, he receives the full, and if he doesn't return the empty and he pours it, now he's got two empties in his hand. So he has to return it after he receives it. That's just what it means. When the receiving is before he pours. Rashi writes, the leftover Dam Pesach, you have to pour it softly. It should fall on the Yisoid, but the leftover of Dam of any other korbanos can be thrown, because we don't care if it goes on the Yisoid or not. It means that any blood that wasn't used on the top, that's on the bottom. The Hilchos Moshe points out that Rashi explains that the blood itself you pour softly and not the leftover. Now, the question is, do you have to leave the blood of the Zrika, that there should be leftover or not? There's a disagreement in that. Tozer says that by B'chor, the Ma'aser Pesach, you have to leave some blood. It should be the leftover. There should always be the leftover to pour at the end. But Rashi in Zvachim Zayin Aleph says that there's no chiyuv, and you can give all the blood on the mizbeach. The Rambam points out in Hilchos Chametz that when you place the blood and all the karbonis and the pouring of the shirayim to the yisoid, and B'Chor Ma'aser Pesach, after he tells us the placing of the blood, he doesn't mention the shiur Adam. It would seem, he says the opinion that all the karbonis you have to leave over shirayim, but B'Chor Ma'aser Pesach you don't need to do so, because they already be there. Their pouring is at the yisoid, and usually, as we said before, you have left over from what was placed on above, and therefore the Mishnah, the Lashon HaMishnah and the Rambam, that right that the Kohen gives the empty one, seems to be right away it's empty. That since he pours all the dam, there's nothing in there to give back in that kli. Rabbeinu Ephraim, the sheet has a different opinion. That Shirayim was not mentioned only with Karbonis, it mentions Shvil Shirayim, like we find in Ezim Mekomim, which we say every morning. That's the Chatas HaPnimis VaReitzonius. But other Karbonis, you don't need to leave over Shirayim. In Yerushalmi, it says, if they pour the Shirayim Adam while there's Chometz in his house, he's Chayiv. So it seems that by Korban Pesach, there's also a din of Shvir Shirayim, otherwise where do you have shiur Hadam? The Rambam continues, the Torah Mafshit is Kulon, that after they're slaughtered, and you receive the blood, and was sent down, then you hang the animal, and you take off the skin. As Rabbi Shmuel ben Yishar says that when Erev Pesach is on Shabbos, you do not take off the entire skin. You only you open up the skin until remove it until the area of the stomach, because that's all you need to take out the innards, and not the entire skin. Therefore, here the Rambam tells you that the Halacha is that you can take off the entire skin even if it's on Shabbos. The reason that they permitted you to take off the entire skin on Shabbos, even though it's from the 39 melochas which are forbidden, is because it's a melocha that you don't need to do. You don't need it. That he doesn't take it off because he needs the skin, because we learned from the Lametes melochas from the Mishnah, and there they took off the skin because they needed the skin. That was the purpose. And since when we take it off here, when you take it off. The Mikdash, they would take it off in small pieces. Now, it would seem from what we're learning over here that actually, since when you take off the on Shabbos, you're over on an Isser because it's psik ratio. You're obviously getting the skin. You have to cut it up into small pieces. So the Lechem Mishnah questions, why didn't the Rambam explain that if Yudal happened on Shabbos, you have to cut it up into small pieces? You can't take it off in one piece. You can't say that the Rambam is the opinion that if it falls on Shabbos, like Rabbi Shmuel, that you don't take off or beyond the area which you have to remove the innards, because he doesn't differentiate between the weekday and Shabbos. So Lechem Mishnah says, maybe we can explain the Rambam that what it says in the Gemara, that you have to cut the skin to pieces, is an answer to Rabbi Shmuel. According to him, but the Chachamim say you could take it off totally, which is come out that the Chachamim say even though it's psik ratio, you can take it off because that's not your intent. But the Atosis themselves disagree in what the Chacham opinion would be. Except the Psochim, they write that according to Chachamim, you don't take off in Shabbos all the leather, all the skin, only in small pieces. And in Masechta Shabbos, they write that in the second answer, like Lechem Mishnah, like Chacham, you can do the entire even on Shabbos, because it's not your intent to get the skin. Now, Elish, who says that Shabbos you should take the Pesach and put it into the skin after it's taken off, like the merchants of Yishmaelim do so. We see, according to the Hachomim, you take it all off. Why would the Chacham permit you to take off on Shabbos all the skin? So we find this in Gemara in Shabbos Kuftes Zayin Amud Beis. It says, Kol Bal Hashem L'Man Nehu. And there's a disagreement what it means. Everything is done for our purpose of Hashem. Rabbi Yosef Omar, Rabbi Yosef says, in order that they couldn't leave Har Bayis till at night, in order that the meat should not become spoiled by the heat of the sun, they permitted the taking off of the entire skin and putting the meat into the skin. Rambam says that it shouldn't be left around as if it was a dead carcass. That's why, even according to Rambam, if Pesach was would be placed on a gold or metal table that it was there, then you don't have bezoyan. You would not be permitted to remove the entire skin. But according to Rabbi Yosef, that the reasoning was it should not become spoiled, then even if it's on a table, you have this problem, and you can take it off. Furthermore, according to Rabbi Yosef on Shabbos, that we have a Ruach Tzvainis, where the reverse situation, which is a cold wind, so you wouldn't be allowed to take it off. But because of Rava, it shouldn't look like an Avela, you would be allowed to take it off. Reb Chaim Abalafia questions the Rambam. He doesn't say the posuk of Kol Pal Hashem L'Man Nehu, and he doesn't say what's the reasoning. The Sha'ar HaMelech explains the question as a question of Ra on Rabbah. Sefer Choik Nosan explains that the Rambam has two reasonings. The Rambam has the opinion, both reasons. If you could take off the Or on Shabbos, even when it's on a gold table, so it shouldn't be, because it may spoil even on a gold table. And also, even if you have a cold wind, you can take it off. It's on a gold table because it shouldn't look like an Avela. But we still don't understand why he doesn't mention that you learn it from the Posuk Kol Pal Hashem L'Man Nehu. The Achronim point out in Hilchos Milo writes, you do everything that's necessary for Milo on Shabbos, the Milo and pushing the skin back, and the tzitza, taking out the blood, and making sure that there's no extra pieces that weren't cut with the first cut. And you can even do those pieces which are just to beautify the procedure, because on Milah B'Shabbos you can go after you cut the orla off to rectify everything, because if they'll be left, the child is not considered mole, and those pieces of meat, of flesh, which would be valid anyway, you can do with that as well. But if you went away from the bris and you thought you had done everything, you cannot go back to it. Halacha is going to Rabbi Shmuel. So the Sha'ar HaMelech, he questions, if we'll say that these dinim are equal by Milo, by circumcision, and also by taking off the skin, just like by Milo, the Rambam paskins, when he finishes, he should not go back. So when he takes off the skin, he should have said that the halacha is like Rabbi Shmuel, that you only take it off until the breastbone, that after you take out the innards, you finished your work. So the Sha'ar HaMelech explains that the Rambam is of the opinion that you don't take the Emurim only after you've taken off the entire skin, like Rashi, and therefore the entire skin is considered like one unit. Sha'ar HaMelech points out that the Rambam says you take the Emurim only after you take off the entire skin, would seem to disagree with what he says in Ma'aser Karbonos, that you cut off the head when you get to the breastbone. It would seem that in the middle you already start to do different portions, and he explains that because Pesach the Rambam paskins, like the Tano on Shabbos, everyone would place the meat inside the skin and put it on his back. Therefore, on Korban Pesach on Shabbos, you would definitely take it all off, and only at the end would you take off the emurim. Therefore, you can take it off in its entirety because you didn't complete the work yet. Thus, that it's exactly like by Milo. As long as the person's doing it, even if it's pieces that are extra, you can do so. Once he opens up the stomach, he takes out the innards and he pushes out as kirbov, the excrement from the innards, the intestines. Mehen Peirush. He removes all the dirt and the dung. Now, this is Hilchos Shabbos. Rashi says, why is that so? So that the chalovim should not become putrid. In how you do this, the machlokes in the Gemara, Ahunon says from the sack and he pushes it out with a knife. Barav says he squeezes the ma'ayim with a knife until it goes out by itself. And he takes out the emurim and he puts them in a vessel, and he salts them, because you have to put on every korban melach. Then he gives it to kohen, because even though all this can be done by Yisrael, he has to give it to kohen. How do you take off the skin? There were hooks of metal. They're called unkliyoy shel basel, and you could hang the through the legs of the sheep. You could hang the animal. They were attached to the walls, and pillars that upon them they would hang the korbanos, and take off the skin. If there were many more people than there were korbanos than there were hanging cooks, there were sticks that were thin and were very smooth. He would place it on his shoulders, on the shoulder of his friend, and between them they would hang it and take off the skin.